Transforming equations into standard form. So when you are looking at an equation that's in slope-intercept form, you want to transform it into standard form, and you have to remember what the difference is. Standard form is going to be in the form ax plus by equals c, where c is a constant. A and b are also coefficients, but they are whole numbers, or they could be fractions as well. But we would like to make them integers, which means we want them to be whole numbers. They can be either positive or negative. So what that's going to tell you is that you're going to start with your original equation. If it has fractions, you're going to want to get rid of the fractions. And you can multiply, as long as you do the same thing to one side, the same thing to the other side, you can do anything to an equation. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually get rid of the denominator first. We're going to multiply everything by 5. So the entire equation, I'm going to multiply by 5. And kind of using the distributive property of the idea of that, I end up with 5y is equal to 5 times negative 2/5 is going to end up being negative 2x. Because it's really like 5 divided by 5. Plus 5 times 1, which is 5. Now I've got everything written as integers. There's no more fractions. And you'll notice that in this case, I do need to end up getting the x first. So when I'm writing standard form, the x comes first. So I'm going to add 2x to both sides of this equation. Now because you have y and x, you can't add them together. So I'm going to write 2x first plus 5y is equal to 5. And now I'm in standard form. I have a positive x value. The coefficients of x and y are whole numbers. And the constant, it's equal to another whole number. Now these are the same equations. They are just in different forms. This forms the top one, y equals negative 2/5 x plus 1, was slope-intercept form. And I transformed it into 2x plus 5y equals 5, which is standard form. Let's try it again. Using that same technique, okay, again, we are given slope-intercept form. We are going to look at multiplying to get rid of any fractions. Looking at the only fraction here is that denominator is a 4, so I'm going to multiply by 4 because that's what's going to get rid of that denominator. It's like dividing by that same number. So we get 4y is equal to 3x plus 8. And again, when you're thinking about this, 4 times 3/4, for those of you that are having a hard time figuring out how does that just become 3? You really multiply by 4 over 1. And if you wanted to see this, it's 4 times 3, which is 12, and 1 times 4, which is 4. And that's how it becomes 3. You could also look at it a little bit differently by dividing those 4s out. So you can cancel those 4s on the top and the bottom, which is equal to 1. Another way that we end up with 3 over 1. Again, I still have to have the x in front. And so I'm going to subtract 3x. So I end up with negative 3x plus 4y equals positive 8. Now the textbook will ask you to have a positive x value. If you do end up with a negative x value, what you can do is you can multiply the entire equation by a negative 1. And when you multiply by a negative 1, it changes all of the signs. So the solution is 3x minus 4y equals negative 8. Now if you end up with two fractions and they have different denominators, what you're looking for is what is that common denominator? And the common denominator in this case would end up being 4. So I'm going to multiply by what that common denominator would be. When I do that, I'm multiplying everything else, so I get 4y. Again, 4 times 7 over 2, same thing as 4 over 1. Another way to look at this, you could cancel. This would give you 1. This would give you 2. So I end up getting 14. So I get 14x plus, and if you look, 4 times 1 over 4. If you don't know that 4 times 1 over 4 is 1, you can always look at it like this. You end up with 4 times 1, which is 4, all over 1 times 4, which is 4, and that's equal to 1. So I end up with plus 1. I'm going to subtract the 14x. In this case, I'm going to end up with negative 14x plus 4y equals a positive 1. I do have that negative in front of the x, so I'm going to multiply everything by negative 1. You get 14x minus 4y equals a positive, or excuse me, a negative 1. And that is how you're going to rearrange these equations with fractions into standard form.